1944, brave Americans in the P-51 Mustang battle it out in the skies over Europe. In this video, Ed McNeff, one of these brave fighter pilots, walks us through an intense dogfight over Germany and some of his most difficult and heartbreaking missions of the entire war, including one where he would see a first-hand loss at the hands of one of Germany's top fighter aces.
And I look over and he's kind of bobbing his head, and I say, Ole, what are you doing? And he doesn't answer me. I said, this is really not good.
Let's hear his story, relive the mission, and hopefully save history. It is March of 1944, just a few months before the Allied invasions at Normandy. And at this time, Ed McNeff is a member of the 355th Fighter Group operating out of England. Flying the P-51B Mustang, these American pilots are tasked with the job of protecting the American B-17s and B-24s as escorts during their long-range bombing missions across Western Europe. In the last video with Ed, he learned that German pilots were skilled and that he had to be careful in these air engagements with the enemy, as one brief mistake could be the difference between life and death. It would prove to be a valuable lesson learned, as he would run into the Luftwaffe again just a few days later. After a couple of escort missions with no action, the 355th would take off for one more on March 29th to Brunswick, Germany. For this mission, Ed took off with his wingman, a pilot by the name of Ben Johnston. Johnston was a seasoned veteran from the 355th and had been with them for quite some time. He had scored one kill on February 21st and had participated in a number of combat missions, as can be seen from the side of his aircraft in this photo. Ed McNeff, however, while a regular of the unit, was still one of the newer pilots at this time.
When you get to the squadron, you're the new boy. The strange thing about flying combat, the new boy becomes the wingman, and the wingman has the obligation to clear the air behind the leader who is trying to shoot down enemy airplanes when they're available. As a wingman, you have a real sense of responsibility. You have to be there, and one of the worst things you can do as a wingman is lose your leader.
Ed would unfortunately learn this feeling all too soon. As he and Johnston took off for this escort mission, it would go down as a memorable one for Ed and Johnston both. As they linked up with the B-17s over France, the 355th escorted the bombers to their target in Germany. Once over this target, however, a group of black specks appeared on the horizon, German fighters. Unlike the last time that Ed faced off with the Luftwaffe, these were not only Messerschmitts, but also Focke-Wulf 190s. The 190 was an advanced German fighter that had served in a variety of roles. It was primarily known, however, for its heavy armament and durability that made it the perfect bomber interceptor. Before these Focke-Wulfs could get to the bombers, however, they would first have to make it past the boys of the 355th in their P-51 Mustangs. The Germans blazed into the American flight, and an intense dogfight began. Flying wingman for Johnston, Ed McNeff followed his leader into the fray. Quickly, Johnston showed just why he was in charge and how a seasoned veteran could fly. According to Our Might Always, a history of the 355th Fighter Group, Ben Johnston pulled behind one Focke-Wulf and opened up, scoring a confirmed kill. With the altitude of the engagement continuously getting lower, just a few moments later, Johnston turned into another and pulled the trigger again. His 50 caliber guns flashed to life, scoring another hit. He watched a second Focke-Wulf go down, his second kill of the day and third overall. But while Ed McNeff followed his leader throughout the engagement, thick cloud cover at a lower level began to make it more difficult to stay with Johnston. He eventually began to lose sight of his leader in the low visibility. This did not stop Johnston, however. Now chasing another German fighter, he dove into the clouds, attempting to score his third kill of the day. McNeff, however, continued to struggle to maintain a visual on Johnston as he dove in and out of the clouds. After this happens a few times, McNeff pulls out, following a run into the clouds, and this time, Ben Johnston is nowhere to be found. He looks around for a few minutes, but is unable to see his wingman anywhere. Knowing that surely Ben would have pulled out of the clouds by now, Ed McNeff fears the worst.
But I was flying on Ben Johnston's wing, and he was chasing an ME-109, and we were in the Frankfurt area, and there was a lot of cloud buildup. So we'd go into clouds and come out, and he'd be still chasing, and we did that 3 or 4 times, and then I came out one time, and he wasn't there. Ben Johnston, I mean.
Little did Ed know that the likely reason for his wingman's demise was that one of the top German aces of the war was hunting in these clouds. But we will cover that in just a little, as that fact would not be learned until much later. The young Ed McNeff, who is now alone, has no choice but to head back home without his wingman. This would be a tough day, but the fighting had to continue. And unfortunately, there were still more difficulties to come. Looking at Ed's logbook, he would take a few days off after this trying mission before he was sent back up to combat again on April 8th of 1944. Since his last wingman had been lost in combat over Germany, he now would need a new leader, and this time, this wingman would be none other than the leading scorer of the 355th, Norm Olsen. Norm was a North Dakota native and had been one of the first pilots to arrive with the 355th. He was the first pilot here to become an ace in the unit, and as of April of 1944, was the leading scorer of the group with 6 confirmed victories. Most of these had been scored in his P-47, which was named Ma Fran III. Once the unit switched over to the P-51B, however, he carried the name over, making this current P-51 Ma Fran V. It was clear that he was a skilled pilot and a seasoned ace, but more than that, he was an esteemed leader in the unit, and today, Ed McNeff would be flying on his wing. The assignment for April 8th was another escort mission into Germany as a group of B-24s were striking Brunswick. After a few hours in the air, the 355th met up with the bombers and flew with them en route to their target. There was a brief clash with a group of Messerschmitts, but Ed and Olsen's squadron were instructed to remain with the bombers and ensure that they were protected. They stayed with the Liberators until the job was done, and then peeled off to head back to England. As part of a recent order though, the Mustangs had a new objective once they turned for home: to attack anything of value on the ground, especially any assets or airfields of the Luftwaffe. Unfortunately, this order would lead to a devastating loss.
Well, I was the wingman and I lost my leader. So the next day I'm flying and I'm assigned to fly the wing on this crusty old flight leader, Norm Olsen. So I'm flying his wing, and we go and we do the bombers, and then we're starting on our way home, and he looks down and I look down, and there's an ME-109 on final approach. So he peeled down and shot the ME-109, and after the day before, when I lost my leader, I wasn't going to lose Norm Olsen, so wherever he went, I was going to go. And we went across the airfield, and we got the golf balls, we used to call them. They were, when they put every 5th round was a tracer. And we were flying across the airfield, and I didn't even care about the airplanes on the ground. I just wanted to stay with Norm Olsen. And he went across the field, and I said, that's fine. And yeah, And he turned around and peeled, we're going to go across the field again. And I said, this is really not good. So we were down, we're going across the field, the tracers are going like this. And fortunately for me, they're coming from his left side. And so I didn't get hit, and then he peeled out and came around. He's going to make a third pass across this airfield. And that's kind of very dangerous because all the guns on the ground know where you are and know what you're doing, and there we're going across, and the tracers are coming up like this, and finally we get to the end of the airfield and peel up, and now we're heading 270, we're going home. Well, and there he is, and all of a sudden I look down and I'm doing maybe 120, and this isn't right. And I look over and he's kind of bobbing his head. And I say, Ole, what are you doing? And he doesn't answer me. And then all of a sudden he peels off like this. And he turned all the way around about 170 degrees and found a little town. And I looked at my map afterwards, and it was Sells, Germany. And he dove his airplane right into the middle of the town. And of course he didn't survive, but that was his final payback. And then I'm on my way home by myself now. But there are enough P-51s going west that you could always find somebody to format with. So it was no problem, but it's very, very dangerous to make 3 passes across one airfield. And I think that book may tell you that we probably lost more pilots strafing than we did air-to-air combat.
You did, yeah. You're exactly right. I believe the book says twice as many, in fact.
Yeah.
This would be a major loss for the 355th. Olson was a leader and the highest scorer of the group, but his decision to go in for repeated passes at the German airfield led to his unfortunate fate. He was devoted to eliminating the enemy aircraft on the ground and would make the ultimate sacrifice in this effort. As heavy as these 2 losses would be for Ed McNeff, a few months later there would be a bit of bright news that would help to make it slightly more bearable. As the American forces were pushing into Germany and liberating POW camps throughout the region, a familiar face was liberated and showed up again in England.
Now, you know, when we were, after we made the invasion and we were sweeping across to Germany and we were closing down POW camps, and the guys in there were being sent home, and Ben Johnson came back through the group to say hello, and he's on his way back to the States. And he says, you know, he got under the clouds and hit a tree and bellied in his airplane and became a POW.
As Ben Johnston came back through England, he reported that he had been hit by a German fighter and then forced to crash land his Mustang, striking a tree on the way down. He was lucky to survive. And, fascinatingly, years later, historians would gain access to German records that would show which German ace was likely responsible for this kill. Looking at the claims of German pilots on March 29th of 1944 and the location and aircraft type, we can determine who may have shot down Johnston. And right here, we can see which German ace has a claim fitting all of these details, none other than Oskar Heinrich Bahr. This German ace tallied more than 200 kills in the war, and Johnston could have likely been the 186th. Following this tragic series of missions, Ed McNeff would continue to serve courageously, learning as much as he could from these losses. But he would still have more trials to come, including D-Day and his closest call yet. All of this will be in part 3 of Ed's story, coming soon in another video. If you know a living veteran of the Air War, please reach out today so we can tell their story. Also, please consider supporting me here so more videos like this can be made. Comment what story I should cover next, and I'll see you next time.